The vicious betrayal of a billionaire's fake wife. Book profile. Genre, dark billionaire romance, angst, fake marriage, secret baby, enemies to lovers, redemption. Core tropes, contract substitute marriage, dead white moonlight returning, cruel emotional torture, runaway pregnant heroine, billionaire regret与 chasing wife, hidden family secrets, gentle second male lead, full-scale misunderstanding and bitter love. Main characters. Ethan Blackwood. The ruthless and possessive top billionaire of New York. Trapped in decade-long grief over his supposedly deceased first love Serena, he is cold, arrogant, and emotionally indifferent. He marries Lila solely for her identical face as a substitute toy to fill his empty life. Out of stubborn pride and obsessive misunderstanding, he brutally hurts the only woman who truly loves him. It is not until Lila vanishes completely that he collapses into insane regret, realizing he has long fallen for her instead of the illusory Moonlight. Lila Moore. A soft yet stubborn ordinary girl with breathtaking beauty, a perfect duplicate of Serena was. Forced by her mother's critical illness and sky-high medical bills, she signs a one-year fake marriage contract, sacrificing her dignity and freedom. She falls in unrequited love with Ethan amid endless humiliation and coldness, enduring all misunderstandings and torture alone. After suffering ultimate betrayal and despair, she chooses to flee silently, hiding her pregnancy and rebuilding her life with unyielding strength. Serena was Ethan's legendary white moonlight and the core villain of the story. She faked her death in a car accident for selfish reasons and returns after years of disappearance. Scheming, jealous, and manipulative, she accurately grasps Ethan's lingering obsession, deliberately framing and humiliating Lila, weaving layer after layer of lies and conspiracies to snatch back her so-called position and love. Asher Carter. A warm and talented elite doctor, the gentle savior in Lila's darkest days. Silent, considerate, and loyal, he always stands by Lila's side when she is hurt and desperate, offering her warmth and protection that Ethan never gives. His existence triggers Ethan's extreme jealousy and possessiveness, becoming the key catalyst for the emotional entanglement and the billionaire's frantic chasing redemption. Full story outline. Chapter 1-5 Contract marriage. The desperate girl signs a humiliating substitute marriage deal and becomes the billionaire's fake wife. Chapter 6-15 Torturous sweetness. Ethan's contradictory coldness and hidden protection make Lila sink into unrequited love. Chapter 16-25 The return of the Moonlight. Serena's sudden comeback brings brutal betrayal and public humiliation to Lila. Chapter 26-35 Heartbreak and escape. Lila discovers her pregnancy, sees through all lies, and runs away overnight. Chapter 36-45 Years of separation. Lila starts a new life, raises her child alone, and gets long-term companionship from Asher. Chapter 46-55 Crazy search. Ethan loses everything, wakes up to his true feelings, and searches frantically for Lila all over the city. Chapter 56-65 Reunion and conflict. The two meet again after years, triggering fierce emotional confrontation, and the child's secret is exposed. Chapter 66-75 Truth revealed. All of Serena's conspiracies and the hidden family secrets are completely uncovered. Chapter 76-85 Billionaire's redemption. Ethan abandons all pride and status, launching a humble and persistent pursuit to atone for his sins. Chapter 86-90 Final ending. Reconciliation与 happy ending. Open ending. Dual optional endings. Full novel text. Chapter 1 The Cold Contract. The bitter winter wind of New York lashed the floor-to-ceiling glass of Blackwood Group's top-floor office, draining every trace of warmth from the luxurious, frigid space. The sky outside was a heavy, lifeless gray, matching the oppressive atmosphere suffocating the entire room. High above the bustling city streets, the noise of traffic and crowds faded into a distant hum, completely isolated from the cold, ruthless world of the billionaire elite. Ethan Blackwood leaned lazily in his custom leather executive chair, flipping indifferently through a thin document. His chiseled features were sharp as ice, his sapphire eyes deep and emotionless, carrying the innate arrogance of New York's most powerful billionaire. His gaze locked firmly on the girl standing stiffly before him, every line of her face an exact, flawless copy of Serena was, the love he'd grieved for a decade. 10 years of frozen grief had turned his heart into a barren wasteland, and he had long believed he would never feel anything for another human being again. Until he found Lila. Lila Moore trembled under his oppressive stare. Dressed in a thin white dress she had worn for years, barefoot on icy polished marble, she endured the biting cold and overwhelming humiliation coiling around her throat. She knew exactly why she had been summoned here. She had heard the rumors circulating in the lowest circles of New York's society. Blackwood was searching for a girl with a specific face, a replacement for his dead Moonlight. She knew her only value to him was this face. She was nothing but a substitute, a temporary toy to fill his empty, lonely life. I will give you $3 million US. Ethan's voice was low, magnetic, and utterly cold, leaving no room for negotiation. The numbers on the paper were enough to save a life, enough to erase every crushing debt weighing on her shoulders. Sign this 1-year marriage contract. Play Mrs. Blackwood perfectly in public, obey all my orders, and never fall in love with me. When the term ends, we divorce. You take the money and disappear without a trace. Lila's fingers shook violently at her sides. Her mother lay dying in the ICU, trapped by a rare critical illness that devoured medical funds at a terrifying speed. Every passing hour brought new hospital bills. Every treatment pushed her closer to bankruptcy and utter despair. Ethan was her only hope, her last lifeline in a hopeless world. She swallowed her burning pride, suppressing the hot tears threatening to spill from her eyes, her throat tight and aching. What are the rules? She asked softly, her voice barely steady. No intimate contact with other men. Attend all public events I arrange and never disgrace the Blackwood family name. Maintain your appearance at all times. Most importantly, never harbor hopes for me, never confuse your role. You are a temporary ornament, nothing more, nothing less. Every word sliced through her fragile heart like a sharp blade. She knew the deal was cruel, dehumanizing, and utterly unfair, but she had no other choice. There was no one else to turn to, no other way to save her only family. Summoning her last bit of crumbling courage, she nodded firmly. I agree. Ethan pushed the printed contract and a silver pen toward her across the glossy desk surface. Lila reached out her trembling hand, grasping the pen tightly, and signed her name shakily on the blank line at the bottom of the document. The moment the ink dried on the paper, her fate was irrevocably bound to this cold, heartless man. Her year of humiliating bondage officially began. Ethan stood abruptly, his tall, domineering frame towering over her, casting a long shadow that completely engulfed her small figure. His cold thumb brushed her soft cheek gently, his touch light yet chilling, yet his eyes remained completely empty of warmth or affection. So soft, exactly like hers. Lila stiffened entirely at his touch. She knew instantly that he was not touching her. He was touching a memory, a ghost, a shadow of the woman he had loved and lost. She was just a mirror, reflecting the face he missed so desperately. Move into Blackwood Manor today. Attend the engagement dinner tonight. Don't embarrass me in front of the entire upper class. With that cold, dismissive order, he turned toward the floor-to-ceiling window, his back rigid and unyielding, ignoring her completely as if she were nothing but a trivial piece of furniture. Alone in the silent, luxurious office, Lila clutched the signed contract tightly in her palm, her knuckles turning white with force. She whispered a fragile promise to herself. Just 1 year. Say Mom, then leave. Never fall for Ethan Blackwood. Yet deep down in her vulnerable heart, she knew some heartbeats were never meant to be controlled, Some feelings doomed to bloom even in the coldest, most hopeless soul. Chapter 2 The Cold Manor Net. Blackwood Manor stood on the most exclusive outskirts of New York, a grand, magnificent villa spanning acres of manicured lawns and luxurious gardens. It was the epitome of wealth and status, yet it carried an indescribable sense of desolation, like a cold medieval castle that had never known warmth or laughter. No matter how bright the chandeliers burned, no matter how elegant the decoration was, the entire mansion remained cold and hollow. From the moment Lila moved her simple luggage into the manor, she felt the thorough indifference and silent judgment of everyone around her. The servants were meticulously respectful on the surface, bowing politely and following every order, but their eyes held obvious alienation and faint disdain. Every staff member in the manor knew the truth: she was merely a poor, ordinary substitute for the late, legendary Serena was. The white moonlight buried deep in their master's heart. Ethan did not return to the manor the first night after she moved in. Lila sat alone in the hollow, extravagant living room until midnight, her eyes fixed blankly on the constantly lit screen of her phone. The hospital had sent multiple urgent messages throughout the afternoon, reminding her that her mother's critical surgery could not be delayed any longer, that every passing day increased the risk of irreversible deterioration. The $3 million from Ethan's contract had arrived in her account on time, instantly clearing all her accumulated medical debts and securing her mother's spot for the top-tier surgery. The money had saved her mother's chance at life, but it had cost Lila every bit of her dignity, her freedom, and her self-respect. She had sold herself for 1 year, trapped in a fake marriage with a man who would never see her as real. It was nearly 2 a.m. when the low roar of a luxury car engine echoed through the quiet courtyard. The manor's automated gates slid open slowly, and Ethan's black limited edition sedan glided into the yard. Moments later, he walked into the villa, reeking of faint alcohol and cold, exclusive masculine cologne. He did not spare her a single glance, his long legs striding straight toward the staircase leading to the master suite, treating her existence as invisible. Lila stood up hesitantly from the sofa, summoning her courage to follow him. According to the contract, she had to maintain the image of a devoted fiancé in all private and public moments, to ensure no loopholes could ruin the perfect fake marriage. At the entrance of the master bedroom corridor, Ethan finally stopped and spoke, his tone icy and sharp, carrying uncompromising warning. Stay in the guest room on the second floor. Never enter my master bedroom at night, never disturb my private space. You're a stranger to me, and you will always be a stranger. The word stranger pierced her fragile heart sharply, leaving a stinging pain that spread through her entire chest. She nodded obediently, biting her lower lip to hold back her sorrow, but his next words only deepened her endless humiliation. Wear the custom formal dress the stylist prepared for tomorrow's engagement dinner. Ditch all your cheap, shabby clothes. Don't let New York's high society laugh at my tacky, unrefined fake wife. Lila retreated silently to the designated guest room, a gorgeous, exquisitely decorated cage with no warmth, no familiarity, no trace of home. Staring at her pale, beautiful reflection in the full-length mirror, she felt a bitter sense of powerlessness. This face, which had brought her occasional admiration in her ordinary life, had become her biggest curse after meeting Ethan. It trapped her in endless comparison, endless humiliation, endless unrequited pain. She tossed and turned restlessly all night, unable to fall asleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's cold, indifferent gaze, heard his ruthless words reminding her of her substitute identity. She struggled to rid her mind of his shadow, yet her heart stubbornly clung to the tiny, foolish hope that maybe, one day, he would see her instead of the ghost he loved. Dawn broke quickly over the quiet manor, painting the sky pale gray. Her phone blared sharply with an emergency hospital call early in the morning, the nurse's urgent voice piercing the quiet air. Her mother's condition had suddenly deteriorated overnight, her vital signs unstable, and the surgery needed to be advanced as soon as possible. Panicked and terrified, Lila rushed downstairs in her casual clothes, ready to rush straight to the hospital. But she froze the second she stepped into the dining room. Ethan was already sitting at the long dining table, dressed in a neat custom suit, eating breakfast slowly with cold, calm precision. "Where are you going?" he asked without lifting his head. His cold voice carrying faint impatience. "My mom's dying. Her condition got worse suddenly. I need to go to the hospital right now," Lila begged desperately, her voice trembling with fear and anxiety, tears already welling up in her eyes. "Stop." Ethan set down his silver cutlery gently, the faint clink of metal echoing in the silent room. His tone was unyielding, merciless, and completely cold. "Tonight is our official engagement dinner. All of New York's top elites, media representatives, and business partners will attend. You will stay here and prepare. I've already arranged the city's top medical team to monitor your mother's condition 24 hours a day. Your presence at the hospital won't change anything, but your absence tonight will disgrace the entire Blackwood family." Lila stared at him in complete disbelief, hot tears finally spilling over her cheeks and sliding down her pale jaw. He valued his cold reputation, his family's empty prestige, above her mother's life, above her desperate pain. "You stopped me from seeing my dying mother just for a dinner." Her voice cracked with suppressed grief, every word soaked in heartbreak. "Your only duty now is to be the perfect Mrs. Blackwood." Ethan finally lifted his cold eyes to look at her, his sapphire gaze devoid of any mercy or compassion. "You signed the contract. You sold your time and your obedience to me. You have no right to choose, no right to be willful." Crushed completely by his ruthlessness, Lila's last bit of hope faded into ashes. Numb, defeated, and heartbroken, she nodded slowly. "I'll stay." That evening, the entire Blackwood Manor blazed with brilliant lights. Luxury cars lined the long driveway one after another, and the grand banquet hall buzzed with the quiet, elegant chatter of countless upper-class guests. Dressed in an ivory silk custom gown tailored to perfectly replicate Serena's classic style, Lila looked breathtakingly beautiful, her delicate features glowing under the crystal lights, yet her eyes were hollow and lifeless. Ethan appeared at 8 o'clock sharp, devastatingly handsome in his tailored black tuxedo. His cold eyes locked on her figure the moment he stepped into the hall. For a split second, the boundary between illusion and reality blurred in his eyes. He almost forgot himself, almost mistook her for his long-lost Moonlight returning to him. He quickly snapped out of the trance, masking his momentary distraction behind his usual cold, indifferent facade, stepping forward firmly to take her hand for the public performance. "Smile and perform well tonight," he warned quietly in her ear, his tone low and threatening. "Make one mistake, and you'll pay the price." Lila forced a perfect, gentle smile onto her lips, letting him hold her hand as they walked side by side into the crowd, becoming the absolute center of attention for the entire banquet. All the noble guests around them praised them as a perfect match, a legendary elite couple destined for each other, completely unaware that the entire engagement was nothing but a cruel, transactional farce. Throughout the entire night, Ethan held her waist affectionately for the cameras and the crowd, creating an illusion of deep, devoted love. But behind the fake tenderness, his eyes never held a single trace of real warmth. When a group of noble ladies whispered and gossiped about her striking, uncanny resemblance to the late Serena, Ethan cut them off sharply with a cold glance, not to defend Lila, but to end the unpleasant reminder of his buried past. After all the guests left and the bustling banquet hall fell silent, Ethan dropped his affectionate act instantly, as if he had shed a useless coat. "You did your job today." His tone was flat, emotionless, no different from commenting on a completed business task. "Can I visit my mom at the hospital tomorrow morning?" Lila asked weakly, her voice hoarse and exhausted from holding back tears all night. "No need." His tone turned cold and harsh again without warning. Don't push your luck, Lila. I can revoke all her privileged medical care at any time. Remember your position. The casual threat crushed her completely. She smiled bitterly to herself, finally understanding that there was no kindness, no softness, no mercy in this man's heart. That night, standing alone in the empty, luxurious corridor, she secretly swore to endure this painful year silently, save her mother's life, and leave Ethan Blackwood forever without looking back. Chapter 3: Ambiguous Torture. The days that followed fell into a cruel, repetitive cycle of fake tenderness and real coldness. Lila played the role of the perfect, obedient Mrs. Blackwood flawlessly in public, accompanying Ethan to endless business banquets, charity receptions, and high society gatherings. Every time the cameras flashed, Ethan would wrap his arm around her waist, lean close to her ear, and show intimate affection, crafting a perfect image of a loving, doting fiancé for the entire upper class to witness. But the moment they returned to the quiet manor, away from public eyes, all his tenderness vanished without a trace. He was distant, silent, cold, and unyielding, treating her like air, ignoring her existence completely. Yet his behavior was painfully contradictory, enough to torture Lila's heart day after day. He ignored her deliberately, yet never allowed her to leave his side. He insulted her substitute identity repeatedly, yet grew subtly, unconsciously attached to her quiet, gentle presence in the empty manor. These fleeting, ambiguous gestures tore Lila's heart apart bit by bit, trapping her in a hopeless, unrequited love she could never escape. One cold rainy night, they returned late from a tedious business dinner. The winter rain poured down relentlessly, icy wind sweeping through the courtyard. Lila wore only a thin sleeveless evening gown, her body chilled to the bone, shivering violently as she walked across the wet courtyard pavement. Before she could steady her trembling legs and rush into the warm villa, a warm black coat was suddenly draped gently over her trembling shoulders. Ethan's exclusive custom coat, carrying his faint cold masculine scent. He stood beside her silently, his tall figure blocking the icy rain and bitter wind for her unconsciously, his movements soft and protective without any deliberate intention. Don't catch a cold. His voice was low, quiet, and seemingly concerned. You have a full schedule of high-end events to attend these days. You can't afford to be sick. His words were still utilitarian, rooted in his obsession with perfect public image, but the warmth of the coat wrapped around her body made Lila's wavering heart stir violently. On sudden impulse, she looked up at him, her eyes glistening with suppressed vulnerability, and asked the question that had haunted her for endless days and nights. Ethan, just for a moment, do you ever see me? Not Serena's shadow, just me, Lila. The faint warmth in Ethan's eyes vanished in an instant, completely replaced by icy coldness and sharp disgust. He stepped back sharply, putting distance between them, his gaze cold and ruthless. Don't be delusional. His tone was biting, unforgiving. You will never be Serena. You're only a substitute, a fake copy. Never forget your humble place, and never overstep your boundaries. The ruthless words cut deep into her heart, reopening every old wound she had tried hard to heal. Lila could no longer hold back her tears. She turned around abruptly and fled into the villa, her steps hurried and flustered, her heart broken and aching beyond repair. Ethan stood alone in the pouring rain for a long time, staring at her fleeing figure, his chest filled with unfamiliar irritation and restlessness he could not explain. He hated seeing her disappointed eyes, hated her fragile sadness, hated that this ordinary substitute girl could stir up chaotic feelings in his frozen heart that Serena had never awakened in 10 years. That night, the cold rain continued to pour, and the temperature dropped sharply. Lila, chilled thoroughly in the rain and overwhelmed by heartbreak, fell severely ill with a high fever. She lay alone in the spacious guest room, her body burning hot, her head dizzy and confused, too weak to move or call for help. She tossed restlessly in bed, trapped in feverish delirium, every breath shallow and labored. Late in the dead of night, the entire manor was dead silent, all servants fast asleep. Ethan had returned to his master bedroom long ago, planning to rest, but he kept hearing faint, intermittent coughing coming from the guest room next door. The sound was soft and weak, carrying a fragile vulnerability that tugged at his nerves relentlessly. After a long moment of hesitant struggle, unable to ignore the faint sound any longer, he pushed open the guest room door quietly. The dim night light cast soft faint light over the room, illuminating Lila's pale, flushed face, her long lashes wet with cold sweat, her small body trembling faintly under the thin quilt. Seeing her lying helpless and sick in bed, his cold, frozen heart stirred with an unprecedented sense of restlessness and guilt. He walked slowly to the bedside, his cold fingers subconsciously brushing her burning forehead, testing her terrifyingly high temperature. In her hazy feverish delirium, Lila mumbled brokenly, her voice soft and tearful, spilling out the deepest secret hidden in her heart for months. "Don't let me love him, please don't let me love him." Ethan froze completely in place, his entire body stiff. She loved him. This fragile, ordinary girl who had endured all his coldness and humiliation silently, who had never complained or resisted, loved him deeply. The realization crashed over him like a violent storm, shattering his decade-long obsession with Serena in an instant. For the first time in 10 years, he felt a sharp, stinging guilt in his chest, guilty for hurting the only person in the world who loved him unconditionally, who loved him for who he truly was, not for his status, his wealth, or his shadow. Driven by uncontrollable concern and chaotic emotion, he turned and hurried downstairs in the middle of the night, rummaging through the private medicine cabinet for the safest and most effective fever medicine. He fetched warm purified water carefully, then returned to the guest room, gently lifting her weak upper body to feed her the medicine. His movements were uncharacteristically gentle and careful, completely different from his usual domineering and ruthless demeanor. He tucked the quilt tightly around her trembling body, guarding her bedside silently for hours without leaving, waiting patiently until her terrifying high fever gradually subsided at dawn. Before turning to leave at sunrise, he stared quietly at her peaceful sleeping face, his voice low and resolute, a quiet confession hidden in the empty room, only for his own chaotic heart to hear. "I'm not letting you go." Chapter 4: Confusing Tenderness and Hidden Possessiveness. The next morning, the rain stopped completely, and soft golden sunlight filtered through the window curtains, spilling gently into the guest room. Lila slowly regained consciousness from her deep exhausted sleep, her body weak and sore, her head still faintly dizzy, but the terrifying high fever was finally gone. The first thing she saw when she opened her eyes was the neatly arranged fever medicine, thermometer, and warm water on the nightstand beside the bed. The faint memories of last night's hazy tenderness flooded back to her mind one by one: the cold touch on her burning forehead, the low gentle voice calling her name, the careful hands feeding her medicine and water. Lila's heart was filled with indescribable confusion and conflict. She could not tell whether those gentle gestures were just her feverish illusion or real tenderness from Ethan. Just as she was lost in messy thoughts, a servant knocked softly on the door and entered the room with a delicate nutritional breakfast tray. The servant's tone was gentle and respectful, with obvious concern in her eyes. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood personally instructed the kitchen to prepare light nutritional meals for you this morning, suitable for post-fever recovery. He also canceled all your scheduled public events and social engagements for today, ordering us to let you rest fully without any disturbance." Lila froze completely on the bed, her eyes widening in pure shock. She could hardly believe what she had just heard. Just a few days ago, this man had ruthlessly refused to let her skip a single dinner even to save her dying mother, prioritizing his family's reputation above everything else. Yet now, he had cancelled all her important high society events for an entire day just to let her recover from a fever. The stark contradiction made her heart waver violently again. The tiny, foolish hope she had tried countless times to crush sprouted up again in her chest, warm and fragile and dangerous. After the servant left quietly, Lila finished the warm nutritional breakfast silently, her mind still tangled in endless confusion. She knew she should not be moved, should not misunderstand his fleeting kindness for affection, should not sink deeper into this hopeless relationship. But his meticulous, thoughtful care was too real, too warm, too impossible to ignore. Ethan spent the entire morning trapped in extreme distraction at work. He sat in his office reviewing company documents and holding high-level video conferences, but his mind was completely fixed on the weak girl resting in the Manor's guest room. Every line of words on the documents was blurred, every business partner's voice sounded distant and indistinct. He had never been so distracted and out of control in his entire career. By early afternoon, he could no longer suppress the restlessness in his heart. He abruptly ended the ongoing conference, ignoring the confused and shocked reactions of his senior executives, and rushed back to the Manor impatiently. He pushed open the guest room door gently, his cold eyes instantly locking on Lila's figure sitting quietly on the bed reading a book. Her face was still slightly pale, but her eyes were clear and bright, completely recovered from last night's sickness. "Your fever's gone?" he asked flatly, deliberately masking all his hidden concern behind a cold, indifferent tone. Lila nodded softly, looking up to meet his gaze, unable to hold back the confusion buried in her heart any longer. "Why did you cancel my events today? You wouldn't even let me skip a dinner to see my mom before." Ethan's jaw tightened faintly. He knew exactly why he had done it, because he could not bear to see her weak and exhausted, because he subconsciously wanted to pamper her and let her rest. But his arrogant pride refused to let him admit his true feelings. He could not accept that he had fallen for his substitute, could not admit that he had unconsciously abandoned his obsession with Serena. So he hid his heart behind a cold, hollow excuse. "A sick and pale substitute will damage the Blackwood family's public image. I only did it to avoid unnecessary public gossip and embarrassment." Lila stared quietly at his guarded blue eyes, easily seeing through his clumsy lie. If he only cared about his reputation, he would have forced her to attend the events while sick, just as he had forced her to attend the engagement dinner despite her mother's critical condition. But she chose not to expose him, tired of struggling with his contradictory personality. "Eat well and regain your strength quickly." His tone turned faintly commanding, another clumsy way to cover his unease. "You have the annual charity gala tomorrow night. You must be in perfect condition." He stood silently beside the bed watching her for a long time, his quiet, possessive gaze never leaving her face for a single second, as if he wanted to engrave every subtle expression of hers in his mind. When he finally turned to leave, Lila's soft voice stopped him abruptly. "Ethan, thank you for taking care of me last night." Ethan's entire body stiffened instantly, his heart skipping a beat. He had no way to respond to her sincere gratitude, no way to face his own chaotic feelings. He could only flee the room in silence, escaping the tender tension that made him lose control. Standing alone in the quiet corridor outside the door, he finally had to admit the terrifying truth he had been avoiding. He was irrevocably, helplessly falling for Lila Moore, his contracted substitute wife. Chapter 5: The Charity Gala and Jealous Outburst. The next night's Blackwood Foundation annual charity gala was the most prestigious and influential social event of the entire year, gathering all of New York's top tycoons, celebrities, politicians, and elite families. Every detail of the venue was luxurious and grand, brilliant crystal chandeliers illuminating the entire ballroom, soft classical music flowing through the air, and endless elegant chatter filling every corner. The Manor's top styling team dressed Lila carefully from early evening. She wore a custom floor-length sapphire blue evening gown, the silky smooth fabric shimmering subtly under the lights, perfectly accentuating her slender and delicate figure. Her long black hair was styled in an elegant low updo, a few faint broken strands softening her delicate facial features. Her makeup was light and sophisticated, highlighting her natural gentle beauty without being exaggerated. When she stood in front of the mirror, she looked every inch a noble, elegant Mrs. Blackwood, stunning enough to outshine all the socialites in the venue. Yet her heart was still calm and empty, well aware that all this glory and elegance was just a fake disguise. Ethan arrived at the guest room door on time, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, his tall figure domineering and perfect, his chiseled facial features more striking and handsome under the formal dress. When his eyes fell on Lila, his gaze paused faintly for a second. For the first time in his life, he did not see Serena's shadow on her face. He only saw Lila gentle, resilient, fragile yet strong, uniquely beautiful in her own way. "You look presentable." He masked his genuine amazement with a cold, casual comment. Lila nodded slightly, her expression calm and unresponsive, no longer moved by his superficial praise. The two left the manor together and took the luxury limousine to the gala venue. The car ride was quiet and tense, neither of them speaking a word. Ethan stared out the window silently, but his mind was always fixed on the quiet girl sitting beside him, hyper-aware of every small movement she made. The moment they stepped into the grand ballroom, all eyes in the venue instantly turned to them. Countless media cameras flashed continuously, capturing their perfect matching figures. Ethan naturally wrapped his arm around Lila's slender waist, pulling her firmly close to his side, showing exclusive possession and intimate affection for the public. "Remember your role tonight." He lowered his head and warned her in a low voice only she could hear. "Smile, stay by my side, and don't cause any trouble." Lila forced a perfect gentle smile and nodded obediently. For the next few hours, she accompanied Ethan to greet endless elite guests, maintaining the image of a gentle, devoted fiancée perfectly. Halfway through the gala, a familiar gentle voice sounded beside them. "Lila." Lila turned her head in surprise and saw Asher Carter standing not far away. Dressed in an elegant light gray formal suit, his warm amber eyes carried sincere gentleness and concern. Asher was the top elite doctor in charge of her mother's treatment, the only person who had given her pure warmth and kindness in her darkest, most helpless days in Blackwood Manor. "Dr. Carter." For the first time in days, Lila's smile was genuine and relaxed, the exhaustion and guard in her eyes fading faintly. Asher stepped forward gently, greeting her softly, carefully asking about her fever recovery and her mother's latest physical condition. His concern was sincere and warm, without any utilitarian purpose or fake pretense, completely different from Ethan's contradictory cold care. Lila relaxed unconsciously, chatting with him softly, the tense string in her heart finally loosening a little. But this peaceful scene fell sharply in Ethan's eyes, triggering a violent, irrational jealousy. He stared at the bright, genuine smile on Lila's face, a smile she had never once given him. He watched her relaxed and unguarded in front of another man, enjoying gentle kindness that he had never taken the initiative to give her. A brutal, possessive anger burned wildly in his chest, devouring all his rationality. He hated it. Hated every warm interaction between her and Asher, hated that someone else could give her comfort he could not provide, hated that she would show her most real side to anyone other than him. "Thank you for caring about my fiancé, Dr. Carter." Ethan's voice turned icy cold, sharp and dangerous, his arm around Lila's waist tightening suddenly, his grip so hard it almost hurt her. Asher did not back down because of his oppressive aura, looking back calmly and firmly. "Lila has endured too much pressure and pain recently. She deserves someone to care for her sincerely." The subtle accusation in the words completely enraged Ethan. Before Lila could explain or ease the awkward atmosphere, Ethan suddenly lowered his head, firmly capturing her soft lips in a brutal, possessive public kiss. This kiss had no tenderness, no affection, no lingering love. It was a blatant territorial declaration, a furious punishment, a ruthless announcement to everyone present, especially Asher, that Lila was his exclusive possession. Lila's eyes widened instantly in shock, her whole body stiff and frozen, her mind blank with disbelief. The entire bustling ballroom fell silent in an instant, countless shocked eyes fixed on them, cameras flashing frantically to record this explosive scene. After several long, possessive seconds, Ethan finally pulled away. His cold eyes swept sharply over Asher's gloomy face, his tone cold and warning. "Stay away from my fiancé in the future." He dragged the stunned, trembling Lila forcefully into the private soundproof lounge at the back of the venue, the last trace of his perfect public facade completely shattered. The moment the lounge door closed and isolated them from the outside world, Lila finally broke down completely. Hot tears rolled down her cheeks, her voice trembling with grief and anger. "Why did you do that? That wasn't a kiss at all. It was just your way of marking territory and punishing me. You are mine." Ethan's eyes were dark and furious, his jealousy completely out of control. "Every part of you belongs to me. You have no right to smile happily for other men, no right to accept kindness from others. You are the one who treats me coldly every day." Lila finally erupted, pouring out all the suppressed grievances and pain accumulated for months. "You ignore me, threaten me, humiliate me. You never give me warmth or care. But when someone else is nice to me, you get jealous and punish me arbitrarily. Ethan, you are so cruel and hypocritical." Ethan was instantly silenced by her tears and accusations. The raging anger in his chest faded rapidly, replaced by heavy, unspeakable guilt. He knew she was completely right. His behavior was irrational, selfish, and hurtful. Yet his stubborn pride still refused to let him bow his head and apologize. Chapter 6: Unspoken Love and Growing Misunderstanding. The private lounge was wrapped in heavy, suffocating silence. Lila stood in place, her shoulders trembling slightly, tears continuously sliding down her pale cheeks. All the forbearance and silence she had maintained for months collapsed completely in this moment. Every cold word, every humiliating arrangement, every contradictory gesture from Ethan flooded her mind, weaving an inescapable net of pain. Ethan stood not far away, his tall rigid figure tense and stiff, his dark blue eyes fixed firmly on her tear-streaked face. The furious jealousy that had consumed him just now had long faded away, leaving only endless guilt and chaotic confusion. He had never seen Lila so angry, so broken, so unafraid to confront him directly. Her every accusation pierced his heart sharply, exposing all his selfishness, hypocrisy, and irrationality. He wanted to step forward, wanted to wipe away her tears, wanted to hold her in his arms and tell her that he cared about her, that he had long fallen in love with her. But his decades of arrogance and stubborn pride chained him firmly in place, preventing him from revealing his vulnerable true feelings. He was Ethan Blackwood, the untouchable top tycoon of New York. He never apologized, never conceded, never admitted his mistakes to anyone. He could not lower his head to his own contracted substitute, could not admit that he had fallen for the girl who was just a fake copy of his Moonlight. After a long period of silent struggle, Lila slowly wiped away her tears with the back of her hand. The anger in her heart faded completely, replaced by exhausted, numb despair. She finally realized that arguing with him was meaningless. His contradictory personality would always torture her, his pride would always crush her hope, and their relationship would never have a happy ending. "I'm tired." Her voice was soft, hoarse, and lifeless, without any anger or passion, only thorough exhaustion. "I don't want to quarrel with you anymore. It's useless." Every day with him was a repeated cycle of hope and disappointment. She would be moved by his fleeting tenderness, then crushed by his ruthless coldness. She would foolishly look forward to his sincerity, then be stabbed deeply by his contradiction. This cycle had exhausted all her strength and courage to love. Ethan's heart clenched violently at her defeated tone, a sharp pain spreading through his chest. He hated seeing her give up, hated seeing her so hopeless, hated that he was the one who had destroyed all her expectations. "I didn't mean to hurt you." He finally spoke, his voice low, gruff, and uncharacteristically hoarse, the closest he could get to an apology. Lila let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh, her eyes still glistening with wet tears. "You always say you didn't mean to, but you always hurt me anyway." There was no way to refute this sentence. Ethan fell silent completely, unable to utter a single word. "Can we go home now? I don't want to stay here any longer." Lila lowered her eyes weakly, no longer wanting to stay in this glamorous and cruel venue for a second longer. For the first time in their relationship, Ethan did not insist on completing his public duties, did not care about the Blackwood family's reputation and face. He only nodded silently, choosing to take her away from the source of her pain. They left the gala venue through the private back corridor silently, avoiding all guests and media, and returned to Blackwood Manor in total silence. The entire car ride was dead quiet, no words exchanged, only heavy, suppressed tension lingering between them. After returning to the villa, the atmosphere between them fell into a strange frozen truce for the next week. Lila completely closed her heart. She was still obedient and perfect in public, cooperating with all Ethan's public arrangements to maintain their fake loving couple image. But in private, she became extremely distant and guarded. She no longer took the initiative to talk to him, no longer looked forward to his tenderness, no longer cared about his cold or warm attitude. She fulfilled all her contractual obligations rigidly, but withdrew all her emotions and sincerity completely. Her quiet indifference drove Ethan almost crazy. He had long been used to her quiet devotion, her fragile expectation, her soft response to every word he said. He was used to being the center of her world. Now that she had completely shut him out, treated him with polite alienation, and no longer had any emotional fluctuations because of him, he fell into unprecedented panic and loss. He began to take the initiative to soften his attitude silently. He no longer spoke coldly to her, no longer threatened her with her mother's medical treatment, no longer deliberately made things difficult for her. He took the initiative to reduce her tedious social schedules, ordered the kitchen to prepare all her favorite foods every day, and arranged for the hospital to send her mother's latest physical examination report to her regularly, letting her rest assured. He used countless trivial, gentle details to make up for his previous cruelty, trying to melt her cold attitude and draw her back to him. But he still stubbornly refused to confess his feelings, refused to admit that he loved her. Lila clearly noticed every change in him, but she no longer dared to have any hope. She had been disappointed too many times, hurt too deeply. She could no longer believe his fleeting tenderness, no longer dared to sink into this hopeless love again. She could only respond to his kindness with calm politeness, keeping her heart tightly guarded. The fragile and peaceful ambiguous state between them continued for more than a week, until a quiet weekend night completely shattered all the false warmth. That night, the living room was warm and quiet. Lila sat on the sofa reading a book quietly, while Ethan sat not far away processing simple company documents. The atmosphere was peaceful and warm, the closest thing to ordinary domestic warmth they had ever had. Just as the two of them were immersed in their own quiet affairs, Ethan's exclusive private mobile phone suddenly rang. It was a strange, unfamiliar number that no one knew except his most trusted confidants. Ethan frowned slightly, put down the document in his hand, and answered the phone casually. "Hello?" A soft, sweet, extremely familiar female voice slowly came from the other end of the phone line, a voice that had been buried in Ethan's memory for 10 long years. "Ethan, it's me." In an instant, all the noise in the world faded away completely. Ethan's entire body froze rigidly, his blood almost solidifying in his veins. All the recent tenderness, all the chaotic feelings for Lila, all the subtle softening in his heart vanished without a trace in this second. Serena was his dead white moonlight. The woman he had grieved for 10 years, the woman he had thought was gone forever, was still alive. His entire world collapsed and restarted in an instant, all his attention and obsession instantly returning to the moonlight he had missed for a decade. His moonlight was back. Ethan's tone remained deliberately cold, masking the subtle relief flooding his chest the second he saw her awake and lucid. He stepped into the room slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the soft bed sheets, every movement unconsciously gentle, a stark contrast to his usual domineering bearing. His gaze swept over her pale cheeks, lingering on the faint flush of health that had returned to her skin, his tight jaw relaxing almost imperceptibly. Lila closed the book in her lap slowly, her fingers brushing the worn page gently. After days of emotional turmoil and physical sickness, her heart was far calmer than before, layered with quiet exhaustion and guarded weariness. She no longer craved his tenderness eagerly, nor was she easily stirred by his fleeting kindness. Every contradictory gesture of his had carved a clear boundary in her heart. His care was never love, only the selfish compassion of a man who hated losing his exclusive possession. "It's gone. Thank you for arranging the meals and rest for me." Her voice was flat and polite, distant enough to alienate all the ambiguous intimacy between them. The polite indifference in her tone pricked Ethan's heart sharply. He was used to her soft obedience, her quiet admiration, her hidden glances that clung to his figure. Now that she treated him like a formal stranger, thanking him rigidly for his basic kindness, a violent restlessness surged in his chest, irrational and uncontrollable. He stepped closer to the bed, his dark blue eyes locking firmly on hers, the hidden possessiveness in his gaze undisguised. "You're being strange today." Lila lifted her eyes slightly, meeting his deep gaze without flinching, a faint, bitter smile tugging at her lips. "I'm just abiding by the contract, Mr. Blackwood. Maintaining a proper distance, not overstepping, not indulging in delusions. Isn't this what you always wanted?" Every word she spoke was true, yet every word felt like a sharp knife stabbing straight into Ethan's most vulnerable, unacknowledged heart. He had spent months warning her not to fall for him, not to harbor delusions, but now that she was truly letting go, truly distancing herself, he felt an unprecedented panic and loss. He hated this. Hated that she was giving up on him before he could even figure out his own feelings. His Adam's apple rolled heavily, and he lowered his voice, the coldness in his tone fading into obscure roughness, a rare trace of helplessness leaking out. "I never said you had to be this cold." Lila's eyelashes trembled slightly, her heart aching faintly, but she suppressed all surging emotion in an instant. She knew better than to sink into his ambiguous words again. He was a man who lived in contradiction. He would push her away cruelly when she got close, yet panic and cling tightly when she retreated. This endless tug-of-war was torturing her soul, draining every bit of her courage to love. "It's the safest way for me." She lowered her gaze, her long lashes covering the faint tears welling in her eyes. "I don't want to get hurt again, Ethan. I can't afford to." The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. The soft sunlight filtered through the window gaps, falling on the floor in worn patches, yet the atmosphere between them was icy and rigid. Ethan stared at her lowered head, at the fragile vulnerability she tried so hard to hide, and for a moment, he wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to tell her that he no longer saw Serena's shadow on her face, that he had long grown used to her presence, that her sickness and sadness tortured him more than anything in the world. But his 10 years of obsession, his towering pride, and his unyielding arrogance chained his words firmly in his throat. He was Ethan Blackwood. He did not beg for anyone's affection. He did not admit that he had fallen for a substitute. So he chose to revert to his cold, domineering disguise, covering his inner chaos with arbitrary dominance. Enough of these meaningless sentiments. His tone turned cold again, sharp and unyielding. Tomorrow night is the business summit dinner. You will accompany me, dress appropriately, and behave flawlessly. No mistakes, no excuses. Lila nodded silently, no longer arguing, no longer questioning. I know. Her overly obedient attitude irritated Ethan even more. He wanted her to quarrel with him, to question him, to show even a little emotion because of him, instead of this lifeless, rigid compliance that treated their relationship as a mere job. He turned and left the guest room in a fit of suppressed irritability, the door closing softly behind him, yet the heavy tension lingering in the room never dissipated. After he left, Lila finally allowed her tears to fall silently, sliding down her pale cheeks and dripping onto the quilt. She knew she was rational, she knew she should let go, but her heart still ached uncontrollably at his hot and cold treatment. That night, the entire manor was unusually quiet. The servants could sense the low mood of their master, walking on eggshells, not daring to make a single noise. Ethan stayed in the living room alone until late at night, cigarette smoke curling around his tall figure, the cold night wind blowing in from the open floor-to-ceiling windows, yet failing to calm the restlessness in his heart. His private mobile phone, the one only Serena had ever known, vibrated again and again on the coffee table. The soft, sweet ringtone was the exclusive tune he had set for Serena 10 years ago, a tune he had never changed, even after her supposed death. Each vibration was a wake-up call, brutally pulling him back from the subtle tenderness he had for Lila, reminding him of the moonlight he had grieved for a decade. After staring at the caller ID for a long time, Ethan finally answered the call, his voice hoarse and deep, filled with unprecedented complexity. Serena. On the other end of the line, Serena's soft, weeping voice sounded fragile and helpless, exactly the way she had always been in his memory. Ethan. I'm sorry I've been gone for so long. I didn't mean to leave you alone. The car accident left me severely injured, trapped abroad for years, unable to contact you. I've missed you every single day. Her words were perfectly crafted, full of fabricated grievances and helplessness, carefully tailored to touch Ethan's deepest guilt and nostalgia. She knew every weakness of this man, knew how to stir his long-buried obsession, how to crush the fragile relationship between him and Lila. Ethan's fingers tightened around the phone, his knuckles turning white. The decade of grief, the endless nights of longing, the empty memories that had haunted him for years all surged back in an instant, overwhelming the subtle feelings he had for Lila. For a moment, he forgot the girl who had cried for him, suffered for him, loved him silently in the cold manner. He only remembered the moonlight that had slipped away from his youth. Where are you now? He asked, his voice low and trembling slightly, a rare sign of emotional fluctuation. I'm in New York. I came back for you, Ethan. I'm scared. I heard you're married, that you have a wife who looks exactly like me. I don't dare to see you, I don't dare to disturb your life, Serena sobbed softly, her tone full of fear, inferiority and sadness. Her deliberate words stabbed at Ethan's heart fiercely. He instantly felt intense guilt, hating that he had let a substitute occupy his life, hating that he had almost forgotten his original moonlight. It's not a real marriage. Ethan denied their relationship without hesitation, his cold words slicing through all the fragile warmth he had built with Lila. It's just a contractual deal. She's nothing but a substitute. Every word was a sharp blade, ruthlessly severing all the ambiguous tenderness between him and Lila, completely negating all her silent sacrifices and unrequited love. Outside the living room door, Lila stood frozen in place, her entire body cold and stiff, every inch of her skin numb with pain. She had gotten up to fetch a glass of warm water, intending to calm her chaotic heart, but she had accidentally heard every single word of his call. She heard him deny their marriage, heard him call her a worthless substitute, heard him pour all his nostalgia and tenderness for another woman. All the trivial warmth he had given her in the past days, the midnight fever care, the cancelled social events, the meticulous meals, the hesitant softness in his eyes, all turned into the most ridiculous, humiliating joke in this moment. He never wavered. He never had a trace of love for her. All his tenderness was just the momentary compassion of a man who was lonely, who was used to her face, who was playing with a substitute's fleeting warmth. Tears welled up uncontrollably in her eyes, blurring her vision completely. She bit her lower lip tightly, suppressing the broken sobs in her throat, not daring to make a single sound, not daring to let the man inside see her utterly defeated and desperate appearance. She stood silently in the cold corridor, the night wind blowing through the window, piercing her skin like ice, yet the pain in her heart was 1,000 times more painful than the cold wind. After ending the call with Serena, Ethan sat on the sofa for a long time, his mind messy and tangled. Serena took the initiative to propose a meeting, her tone soft and tentative, begging him to meet her once, just to catch up after 10 years of separation. After a long struggle, Ethan agreed. "I'll see you tomorrow night, after the summit dinner." He told himself it was just to settle the old past, to end the decade-long obsession, to clear his heart completely. He did not realize that this choice would push Lila completely out of his life, leaving him with endless regret for years to come. The next day arrived swiftly. The night of the business summit descended, and the entire high-end banquet hall of the International Hotel was brilliantly lit, crowded with New York's top tycoons, celebrities, and media elites. Dressed in a tailored champagne haute couture gown, Lila stood beside Ethan, her figure slender and elegant, her makeup exquisite and flawless. She perfectly played the role of the gentle, dignified Mrs. Blackwood, smiling gracefully for the cameras, responding appropriately to every guest's greeting, without a single mistake. But behind her perfect smile, her eyes were hollow and cold, no longer holding any trace of love or expectation for the man beside her. Ethan kept a proper intimate distance from her throughout the banquet, his arm loosely around her waist, his eyes scanning the crowd casually. He was distracted all night, his mind constantly wandering to the upcoming meeting with Serena, oblivious to Lila's thorough emotional breakdown. Halfway through the banquet, a soft, graceful figure quietly appeared at the banquet hall entrance. Serena Voss stood there, dressed in a pure white dress, her features soft and delicate, her eyes carrying faint tears and vulnerability. She was exactly as Ethan remembered her, gentle, lovely, the perfect Moonlight buried in his youth. The moment Ethan saw her, his eyes instantly focused, all his casual indifference vanishing completely. He subconsciously let go of Lila's waist, his body tensing slightly, his gaze fixed tightly on Serena's figure, unable to look away. The subtle movement was captured clearly by everyone around them, and the surrounding whispers of gossip instantly rose. Lila felt the empty warmth around her waist in an instant. She turned her head slightly, and saw the way Ethan stared at Serena the way he had never once stared at her. It was longing, obsession, youthful nostalgia, a deep affection that had been buried for 10 years, sincere and burning. In that second, all her lingering persistence completely collapsed. She finally understood that she could never compete with Serena. She was just a temporary replacement, a tool to soothe his loneliness, a shadow that could never replace the moonlight in his heart. Serena walked slowly towards them, her steps gentle and weak. She stopped in front of Ethan, her eyes red and teary, her voice soft and trembling. "Ethan." Ethan's body stiffened slightly, and he took a step forward almost involuntarily, completely blocking Lila behind him, as if she was an insignificant outsider who did not deserve to be present in their reunion. "You're here." His voice was unconsciously gentle, a tenderness that Lila had never heard from him. The scene in front of her was dazzlingly humiliating. All the guests were staring at them, whispering and watching the farce of the fake wife and the returning Moonlight. The camera lenses were quietly aimed at their group, ready to capture every embarrassing moment of hers. Serena glanced gently at Lila behind Ethan, her eyes full of pretended guilt and inferiority. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you and your wife. I just couldn't help but want to see you." Her words were humble and gentle, yet they pushed Lila into the most awkward and embarrassing situation in an instant. Lila lifted her head slowly, wiped away the faint moisture in her eyes with her fingertips, and raised a calm, indifferent smile on her lips. She no longer felt sad, only a thorough, exhausted relief. She stepped back quietly, taking the initiative to distance herself from Ethan, completely withdrawing from their illusory affectionate reunion. Ethan noticed her movement out of the corner of his eye, and a faint irritability surged in his chest. He frowned slightly, glancing at her coldly, silently blaming her for making trouble at such an inappropriate moment, for being petty and jealous. That cold, blaming glance was the final straw that crushed Lila completely. She stood quietly in the bustling crowd, surrounded by noise and lights, yet she was trapped in a boundless cold and desolation. At this moment, she made up her mind completely. After tonight, she would end this ridiculous contract, end her unrequited love, leave this cold manner, leave this man who had tortured her to the core, and never look back.